Good Monday morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. Again, I'm going to ask you if you would please share, like, comment. Said it the same way so many times, and I get mixed up and I can't get it out. Like, share, comment, if you will, on this post. And then, if you would like, you can join me, follow along in the book of Galatians, chapter 1, beginning in verse number 10. One of the things that was going on, part of the reason Paul was writing is there were two groups who were, or two accusations, maybe sometimes two groups, maybe sometimes one group making two accusations, but there were two major problems, issues going on in Galatia. There were those who were saying, their two statements or two complaints were, one, it was that Paul was a false teacher, that he was preaching, that he hasn't really been called by God. And so they were saying that again, his call to preach was fake, and that he was just doing this to make money. That it was just a racket for him. And then there were those who were just saying simply that what he, on top of that, then that what he was preaching was false. And I guess those two things really go hand in hand. If you're not really called by God to preach, then you're probably not preaching the truth. And so that was what they were accusing Paul of. And by doing so, again, they were doing two things. They were obviously damaging Paul's reputation, but by damaging Paul's reputation, they were undermining the faith of the Galatian believers, because most of them had come to faith through the preaching of Paul, or at least were in the chain of the preaching of Paul. In other words, Paul had told somebody who had told somebody. And so by undermining Paul, then they were ultimately causing trouble and doubts in the minds of these believers. And so it was a major problem, not just for Paul personally, but for the people in Galatia, the believers in, which then ended up being a problem for Paul because he loved them, had a lot invested in them. And so Paul responds here in three ways, and these are really some good examples for you and I today of how Paul defends himself. These are three things that we should keep in mind as well. In verse 10, he says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." And so he declares here that I'm not trying to please man. My goal is to please God. Basically, one of the other things is he says you can't do both. You can't possibly try to please God and please man. And so he says, he says, when I was with you before, did you think I was trying to please man or please God? Well, now what do you think I'm doing now? Do you think there's really been some kind of change in me and my service? I am attempting to serve the Lord, and that's my ambition. That's my goal. That's what I want to do. That's who I am. I'm still not trying to please man. I wasn't, again, I wasn't trying to please man when I was with you before. I'm not trying to please man now. And again, he says you can't do both, and good for us to remember. You're gonna make an enemy of one. You can't you won't, very seldom will you be able to make both sides, man and God, satisfied and happy. And so he says, I'm first of all, I want you to know I am trying to please God and Him alone. Second of all, to do that, I'm preaching the gospel. Verse number 11 here, he says, "For I would have you know, brothers, that the gospel that was preached by me is not a man's gospel. For I did not receive it from man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ." Second thing that Paul says, and again, a great example for us to follow, is Paul says, I preach the gospel. I didn't preach anything I believed. I didn't preach anything from the denomination. I didn't preach what some church had told me or anything of that nature. I preached the gospel and the gospel alone. And again, some were saying that again, Paul was not really an apostle of Christ. That he wasn't really apostle of Jesus Christ. That he was seeking to glorify himself, to make money, whatever. And he uses a word here that when he uses this word, when he says, here, I'd have you to know that I was gospel, but I received it through the revelation, that I was taught it. It's a word that when he said, I would have you to know, King James Version says, I certify to you. And that's a very, very strong word that Paul uses to defend himself and his teaching, that he was teaching the gospel. It was like a notary seal, a court case that would be brought. I can't think of what you call it when in court you testimony, an affidavit. That's the word I'm looking for. He says that I'm putting in front of you here that guarantees that what I am saying is correct, that I am preaching not my gospel, but a gospel that was given to me, that was revealed to me through Christ, from Christ. And so he's stressing what he is preaching. Again, great lesson for us. If we preach anything, if we try to preach anything other than the gospel, it will eventually get undermined. It will eventually fall apart. He says, the gospel I'm preaching didn't come from man, wasn't created by man, but it is the gospel of Jesus Christ and him alone. And then his third defense was, and this is the greatest defense really that you and I have still today. He says, you've heard of my former life in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God vilely and tried to destroy it. He says that, the greatest example I've got for you here is the life I used to live. I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people. So extremely zealous was I for the traditions of my father, but when he who had set me apart before I was born called me by his grace and was pleased to reveal his son. He says, I changed. He says, I'm a different person now. He says, that's the greatest proof I have of what I preach, of who I am, that I'm a different person now than what I used to be. And we have no greater testimony today than a changed life. I've shared with you before, one of the easiest, simplest ways that we have of sharing the faith is a three-part process. This is what my life used to be. And you spend just a minute or two telling somebody how your life was a mess, what went on. Then a simple statement. Then I met Jesus, and then you talk about what your life is like now. That's exactly what Paul is modeling here. You know what I used to be. Then I met Jesus, and he says, you see the difference in me. So Paul here has given us really a threefold approach to reaching people, to being a witness to people. Seek to please God, not man. Don't worry about what man thinks. You worry about what God thinks. You preach the gospel, straight gospel. Give them Jesus. And then finally, when all else fails, show them your life. Show them what is different now in your life since Jesus has come in. All right, keep that in mind. You have a good day. We will see you here tomorrow morning. As we leave, let me say happy Veterans Day. Thank you. I don't usually mention holidays because I never know when exactly somebody will be watching these things, but I'm grateful. Thank you for the veterans who have made it possible for me to be able to do this. And thank you for your service, your sacrifice to all of our veterans. All right. Have a great day. We'll see you here tomorrow morning.